It doesn't eat them. Look how many fish are in the peg right now. So I'm thinking any moment now you've got this one, and this one behind, you actually get an opportunity to see it. This one behind, he's there. I thought he's head down on your bait.
Well, he's got it.
He's got it. He's got it.
How good was that?
Beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. Clever you these days.
Yeah, look at that. Nice little intro into it as well. Ladies and gents, Lee Kerry has turned into a far more handsome Jake Fowles. So Lee Kerry today is fishing the 2-day Ridding Silverfish Festival. I'm actually going to meet him tomorrow. We're going to do a little bit of filming. So he can't be with us on the live, unfortunately. But that means we've got fantastic news. We've got Jake in the hot seat. For anyone who doesn't know Jake, Sonobait's bait, I'm going to say bait expert. Every time I need some sort of bait guidance, Jake's there chipping in. Also, media marketing whiz kid. Say hello, Jake, to everybody.
Good afternoon.
Right, yeah, so if you've got any questions, bait related, or we're also going to touch on media and marketing and sponsored anglers later on. If you've got any questions along those lines, fire them in. We'll get them answered. I want to talk about our fishing though, Jake, because we both fished some big events over the weekend. Start off with you, Moorlands Farm.
Yep. So I was filling in for Rory Jones, the Rory Jones at Moorlands Farm. So Grant at Moorlands is running a great silverfish league, really, really well populated, which is great to see at Moorlands, and will lead on to something that we'll talk about after this. So I was filling in for Rory. Great league, turned up on the morning and loads of people there, good buzz around the venue. And I drew on Moors Lake, which if for those who haven't seen Moorlands in a while, Grant's been doing loads of work. He's changed, basically sorted the banks out. All the lakes look great. And they're full of fish. Obviously, I think you and Lee and myself and Lee talked about on a similar thing a couple of weeks ago. Is the time of the year right for silverfish events? Personally, I think it's gone a bit too early. On the day, I fished Moorlands and I've caught so many F1s. Did well. I say I've done well. I came second in my section, which is a good start to the league. It's an 8-round league, 8 or 10 rounds. So firsts and seconds are going to be what you're going to need throughout the league to end up, if Rory finishes top 5 overall, or top 10 even in an 85-man league, is going to be a great result. So first and seconds are what you need. That's what I've done. Catching loads of little sort of hand-sized skimmers, not even hand-sized, 3 ounces. Great fishing. The one thing that sort of set me back a little bit was being up to date with the lakes. Some of the lakes, there's bank pool there where you're wanting to catch better skimmers, 1.5 to 3 pound skimmers, which are different fish. You catch them on casters short, that sort of thing, late in the day. Whereas the main lake, Meadow, I believe it's called, and then the lake I was on, Moors, is a lot of like these little tiny skimmers, which are generally tappy pellet fish or pinkies over ground bait, that sort of thing. So tried fishing pellets, caught a lot of F1s. I've had on my pellet line, my first 3 fish are F1s, so I've binned that off.
Obviously, F1s don't count. I know some silverfish matches, F1s count, don't they? But obviously,
yeah. Oh, I'd have been loving life if they counted. I've probably had £100 throughout the day. They weren't. It wasn't like they were little ones either. They were £3 and £4 massive golden things, which was making me think I'd love to go there and fish a match where they actually do count, because it'd be great fishing. The loads of bites. I can't all day. I've had bites, which is brilliant, really. And across the complex, it was good. The fishing, the weights aren't particularly massive, but that isn't a reflect. It's basically the stamp of fish that means that is the case. You're catching lots of fish, perch, roach, little skimmers on most lakes, and then on certain lakes you're catching those bigger skimmers and bream as well. Really enjoyed it. I think when we've had a couple of frosts and those F1s and carp just calm down a bit, it'll be much better. But one thing I will say is it was great to go to Moorlands, a historic commercial fishery, and see that the buzz the buzz was back. It was great. 85 people there on Saturday. It was brilliant to see, and yeah, it was. I'm a bit gutted I didn't book on that league myself, because having gone, I think I'd sort of got me teeth stuck into that a little bit.
Right, let's talk about that, because there's 85 people going to Moorlands on a silverfish match. Moorlands, sort of like 5, 6, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, I'm going to say it was in the doldrums a little bit. It was that many people weren't going. It was a few smaller matches, a few club matches, and that was about it. But it seems to have been put on back onto that open match scene, doesn't it? There's qualifiers on there now. Obviously, big leagues going on. I've not been since Grant's done all his work, but when I'm looking on Facebook and I'm looking at videos that he's putting up and he's talking about the work that he's done, it looks like proper neat and tidy. Do you know how it looks? Really clean, neat, tidy. He's put a load of effort into it, and it's sort of know how much that's going to cost, and it's going to cost a hell of a lot of money.
Oh, he's done some work to it. That's
and I just wonder, obviously, he's done that for the love of the place, hasn't he? Because he loves Moorlands, you can see that when it comes through. But obviously, you're fishing it and talking to other people that have fished it. It seems like, I mean, you're catching £100 of F1s in late November, trying to avoid F1s. Yeah. So that tells you how good the venue is, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Grant, before Grant was in there, like you say, the matches would have been a few locals or a few people that have just sort of stuck with it. But it sort of fell by the wayside. As much as venues like Moorlands, everybody wants to be great, like because it's so historic. One of the first commercial fisheries that, like, you think about the names that used to go, like Kieran Rich, Des Ship, they're the Andy May, like they put their commercial sort of prowess these days down to like the early days at places like Moorlands. So everyone wants them to do well. And I think Grant's one of them that sort of, when that opportunity sort of came up where he's taken over there and moved there, yeah, that's what he wants. He wants to bring it back to the sort of heyday of those sorts of venues. And there'll be loads of venues around the country where that's the case. Maybe venues that were once great that aren't so great anymore. And
I'm trying to think of a venue that has fell off the map a little bit, but I don't think I can think of a commercial venue that's fell off the map. But there's a few natural venues that have become that were in favour for a big period of time and then fell away. You know, historic places like Coombe Abbey, places like that. I'm thinking that just lost out, as in they're the perfect place for anglers to go, but anglers weren't at the forefront of that place. It wasn't that wasn't purposely built for anglers. It was just a really perfect place for anglers to go. And I don't think anyone goes there anymore, where it used to hold 100, 200 peg matches there. Yeah. Probably a few of the reservoirs as well that just fell out of favour a little bit, like natural venues. But I think commercials, unless I'm wrong, unless you guys have got somewhere that you can think of that's fell out of favour and sort of just was amazing, then just fell off the map a little bit, I can't really think of a commercial venue that's done that.
No, and there's with Moorlands, it was never that it disappeared. It just, like, the numbers that used to go there, then the numbers are a lot lower, and then now they're brilliant. Like at end of November, 85 people on a commercial venue is brilliant. And I do think that as much as me, yourself, Lee are all in agreement with the fact that silverfish matches have gone a little bit early this year, I think that is one of the things that type of fishing has brought into fishing, isn't it? Like the fact that all of a sudden, come the end of November, where a lot of people would have been like, oh, I'll sort of slow down, might only go every once a month, once every other week, something like that. All of a sudden, those matches have sort of reinvigorated people and are sending people to those sorts of venues. But with Moorlands in particular, like, the match attendances have been great all year. So fair play to Grant for doing that.
I think he's been really vocal as well. He's been good at promoting the place. And it just shows when someone's heart's in it, they make it work, don't they?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think fair play to him. Because like I say, it's cost a lot of money to get that right. And hopefully he sees the return on it. And you can just tell that you know, I think he's enjoyed doing it and getting it back to where it was. So, you know, like I say, fair play to him.
Yeah, the good thing about a place like Moorlands as well, he's one thing. There was always like a bit of a cafe there, but it was a bit of like a sort of your typical trailer that was doing a odd breakfast sort of thing. When you go in there now, it looks really nice. Like he's sort of got lots of like fishing memorabilia, pictures that he's got, whether it's himself or other people, trophies up. But then the food's good. It's not like a greasy spoon. It's a nice cafe where I think people would sort of go there even if it wasn't because they were going fishing as well. So I think that sort of like footfall of just other people as well helps, because the cafe's there trying to appeal to non-anglers, and therefore it's a bit better for anglers, if you get what I mean. It like I say, it's not just your typical greasy.
Is there a few, because obviously he's on the main road there, is there a few non-anglers coming in, do you think?
Yeah, there's like the signs along the road, like the cafe, like, and telling people off the main road that there's a cafe down there. So I think there is.
Why not? Because obviously it's a cafe next to some lakes. So why wouldn't just a normal family or a couple pop in and have something to eat?
Yeah, so he's doing a great job, and yeah, like I say, should have booked on that league myself.
Yeah, should have done. My first Fishermania final, I qualified at Moorlands on, I think it was called Island Pool, but there isn't an island in it. You drive in and it's on the right hand side. There is an island now. I think that's been put back in. I think when they've done the banks on the other lakes, he's put the island back in there. Because I remember it's behind the cafe where the cafe is. Yeah.
If you look out the back windows, it's basically there, and that's what's Island Pool now. But there is now an island, and I think, because I remember a couple of years ago there wasn't an island in there, or whether the island had just eroded, so it was more of a sunken bar or whatever. There is now an island in there, so.
But it didn't matter. I caught about 10-inch deep, mugging every fish. So I didn't even plumb the depth that day. Fantastic day. Talk about my weekend, because it started off on Friday. I went from hero to zero, and it started off on Friday. I went to Langold Lakes. There's a Guru feeder cup. First time it's being run this year, and it's all been held at a place called Langold Lake in Sheffield. Now,
been there with Lee.
Well, amongst a lot of people, it's a famous venue. I've not even heard of it until this year. But a lot of people have been talking about it, and there seems to be a lot of people who have fished the venue over the years that are really knowledgeable about it.
It looks a bit like a park lake, doesn't it? It's like in the middle of, a lot of people go dog walking around there and things like that.
Yeah, honestly, the bank is chock-a-block with dog walkers and like anglers walking around, because they would just walk. It's like local to them, so they go for a walk around the lake, and there's loads of people. It's constant all the time, and don't get me wrong, it's a park lake, but there was no idiots. It was quite nice. Everyone was really pleasant. If they wanted to stop and have a chat with you, and it was all right. It was great. The fishing, it's not a bag up lake. It is a more natural lake. There's some carp in it, but I think they're more targeted by specimen carp anglers. I don't think it's a match carp venue, from what I can gather. And it's mainly bream, skimmers. There's some little tiny roach in there, and one sturgeon that keeps getting caught.
Oh, really?
And this sturgeon in the last 2 weeks has been caught at least 3 times. Bear in mind, the lake, it's not quite as big as Boston. It's not quite as big as Boston, this lake, but it's getting on for that size.
Yeah.
And there's one sturgeon in there, and it's been caught 3 times in the last 2 weeks. So he's doing the rounds, and he's obviously hungry. Or daft, or both. And everyone was telling me, sort of like, it's feeder only, by the way, these competitions. And people were telling me sort of £6 is going to be great. If you catch £10, that's amazing. So it's tough fishing. And I just set out catching these little roach. I fed some bait long for a bream, and I just thought, if I get my timings right, I've got a chance for a bream late on. Further out, and I can keep an eye on everyone around me to see if it is a bream day. But as it was, plan was to just get my head down, catch a load of these roach, and they were little. I'm going to say they're like 25 to the pound, something like that.
Yeah.
But as we got to sort of 4th hour, I've realised that actually I'm probably nosing ahead here or level with the guys that have caught an odd bream. And it got to that point where the two people that I was fishing against, they'd caught some bream and they were breaming. It's last hour, I've put some bait out long, and it was a case of, well, if they're breaming, I might as well bream, because at least if they get one, chances are I'm going to get one as well. If the bream start feeding, I'm on the right line. And as it was, they didn't catch any more fish, but I've had sort of like a few chucks on my bream line, and as I'm talking to someone behind, I've just chucked out like third or fourth chuck on my bream line, and as I'm talking to a couple of the lads behind me, I'm sinking my line, and I can feel my rod jagging in my hand, and I can look. I looked up and I see my braid tightening up on the surface. I thought, we've got one. It was about £3, something like that. And
nice, massive bonus.
Managed to win the match because I had all my roach plus my £3 bream. Managed to win the match and qualify for a final. Finals for £5 grand. I think it's £5 grand for the winner, £3 for second, £2 grand, £1 grand. Really good payout. That's obviously if everyone, if all the qualifiers are full. I think what they're trying to do is really good because and it shows, that if you organise something, people will come. And people will, if it's well organised, people will come, people will support it because it's the first year it's being ran. It's not like it's a bag up amazing, it's a beautiful venue to fish and you get bites, but it's not like you go there and catch £100 off every peg. So people aren't necessarily going there for the fishing, they're going there because someone's actually taking the trouble to organise something. And it's fantastic. So I enjoyed my day on Friday. Saturday, I didn't fish. I was coaching
Just touching on that. So, how many qualifiers are there going to be? If that was the first one, how many is
10
it?
qualifiers with 30 pegs.
All at Langold.
All at Langold. Yeah. Every single one's at Langold. I'm not too sure whether they're all sold out. Hopefully, they all get sold out. I think they are. All of them are sold out. Maybe there's a couple after Christmas that aren't. Yeah. But it's just good to have another big feeder style, natural venue style competition to target, especially during the winter. I think the final's in March, or it might be early April, something like that. So there's plenty of time. If you've not got, if you fancy doing it, you've not bought a ticket, there's plenty of time. I'm sure you'll be able to get a ticket between now and April. But it's called the Guru Feeder Cup. It's on Langold Lake. You'll find it on Facebook, no problem. Saturday, no fishing. Sunday, Hullcroft feeder pairs.
Nice, big event.
The Hullcroft feeder pairs, 60 anglers. 30 pairs, amazing anglers fishing this, some really top lads fishing this. I went for a practice last week on Wednesday, so I thought I feel pretty confident here. Feel like I know what I'm doing. I just got it totally wrong, yesterday. Totally wrong, and I still can't put my finger on where I got it wrong, but I got it wrong. There was a £12 to my right, a £14 to my left, and I had £7 in the middle of those two anglers. And they're good anglers, don't get me wrong, they're good anglers. But I was sitting there and I just could not get anything going. It just wouldn't happen. And I think Hullcroft's had a few problems with flooding. The water is absolutely freezing because obviously, if you imagine, it's been flooded and all the flood water's now sitting in the lake. So it's going to take a while to settle down.
Yeah.
We never expected the fishing to be as good as it was because we just thought that flooding was going to really affect everything.
Yeah.
But the fishing was great. I think because it's been a little bit milder. The fishing was great.
Did you just come there too negative?
I was a bit too negative, I think, and I don't think I was a lot too negative. I think I was just a little bit too negative.
Yeah.
And if I'd have just upped it a little bit more, I think I'd have caught a lot more. And I don't think I was on the best peg by any means, but if they're catching 12 and 14 pound around me, I should be catching that. And I drove home just shaking my head because I just thought I needed to push that a little bit more today. I needed to push that. I fished mainly ground bait in the feeder, an odd maggot, dead maggot, an odd pinky, and really sort of like scaled down winter approach. And I wish now that I'd have fished a slightly bigger feeder, more particles through the feeder, bigger hook baits, And because in the end of the day, we're targeting skimmers that are sort of 8 ounce to 1.5 pounds.
Yeah.
Not little tiny fish. There was no little tiny fish to be caught. So I wish I'd have just fished bigger feeders, more particles. But this is the thing with fishing that fries your brain, Jake. After the match, because obviously I want to learn from everybody. So after the match, I've got up. I've walked to Matt on the right hand side of me. I spoke to Matt. I said, "Tell me what you've done, Matt." And he says, "I've put a little bit of bait in, and then I've chucked an empty feeder over the top of it. Right, an empty feeder over the top of it." I said, "All right, good." Because you can't obviously at Hallcroft, you've got to fish a feeder. You can't fish a bomb.
Yeah.
And sometimes Hallcroft is a tough old place. You don't want to feed a lot of bait. Yeah. So he said, "Put a little bit of bait and then chucked an empty feeder over the top of it." If I filled my feeder with any bait, I just felt I weren't getting any bites. Right? He's had 12 pounds. I said, "All right, interesting." So I went to speak to Rich, who's had 14 pounds. And he says, I said, talk me through it, Rich. I said, "How much bait have you fed?" He said, "Oh, those 2 pots there, they were full of bait. I fed all bait. I fed those 2 pots." And he showed me his feeder. He's got a slightly bigger feeder on than Matt. He says, "So I'm putting this bait. I put my bait in." He says, "I'm quite aggressive anyway. I like to feed quite a lot of bait, and I've got one guy feeding loads of bait one side of me, and one guy catching on an empty feed the other side of me."
And you've done like in the middle, and somehow got
and just not got it right. And there was a point in the middle of the match where there was a few fish in my peg. I'd get an odd liner, and I thought there's a few fish there now, and I wasn't quick enough working it out. And sometimes you just got to hold your hands up and just go, "I just got it wrong. Hopefully I get it right next time." I suppose it happens to everybody, doesn't it?
Definitely. Just touching back on my weekend. So I had Lee Mushy Farmer to my right at the weekend, where there was a gap in between us. And I'm saying he battered me. He's got an extra 50. I've had like £9. He's had £12. So he's done me fairly comfortably when you look at those weights that you're dealing with. You're not dealing with massive weights. He has had a 2.5 pound perch, which he basically thought was an F1. He's pulling its head off, like trying to basically get it to break him, and it's popped up a perch. Oh, it's a perch! Like,
yeah,
I'm like hooking an F1 every single chuck. But like, I looked at that and I was going, I didn't feel like I've done loads wrong. He's tried fishing pellets and not really caught on them. He's then caught on like the same sorts of things, loose feeding casters down his edge and a short line where he's loose feeding there as well. But yeah, I came away thinking like, have I done something massively wrong to get beaten fairly comfortably, as much as bonus fish came into play? But I didn't really I didn't really know what if I'd done that wrong, other than the fact that when I arrived at my peg, there was F1s rolling all over the place, and I've hooked a lot more F1s.
So do you think you've been on a pod of F1s, do you?
Oh, I got there, and like it was a rolling draw from 7:30, and I'm always up early. So I got there, had a toasted sausage sandwich or whatever and a cup of tea, drew and went straight to my peg, and it wasn't light, it was just about going light, and my peg was a joke. Like here's my peg, it was just
really
it was straight in front of me, and I was like, I saw everyone getting 14.5 meters out the bag, and I was going, that's exactly where every single one of them F1s is that's top. So I sort of fished a little bit short and still hooked one pretty much. Like, if once they found my bait on every single line, they were just there. I couldn't get rid of them. And I've like started new lines and hooked one first chuck on them. So I do think there was a pod of them there. But then Lee was in between me and the lad to Lee's right, so sort of 2 anglers away from me. He's hooked a lot as well. So Lee's in between us both. And like, I just don't think that they wouldn't have been in front of him as well. So he must have done something slightly different to avoid him a little bit.
This is what happened to me and Dan Webb the other week at Medlands.
Yeah,
Rich Chapman's in the middle slaying skimmers, and me and Dan Webb are just hooking carp after carp after carp.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about Lee's peg, it is deeper towards him than it was for me. So whether like my peg was 5 foot pretty much everywhere, whereas his I think is a little bit deeper than that. So whether it's just that he's getting his bait past some F1s more so than I am, I don't know. But
if we knew all the answers, we wouldn't keep doing it, would we?
Exactly. Yeah.
We're going to talk about a couple of other things in a minute because I want to ask you about your roles in marketing. We've got Tim Baker, afternoon chaps. Travel and living tips. Obviously, he's got a channel. Morning, Rob. Please tell me we're going to have a new underwater video soon. They changed my fishing style and my results so much, and now I can't get enough of them. So yeah. Travel and living tips. There is an underwater video coming soon. We're trying to film one in the next couple of weeks as well, but we've got one in the bag. We've actually got 1 3/4 in the bag. So we've got one coming over Christmas time. It is very good. It is the best clarity of water that we've ever had. And we catch some beautiful fish. We catch some bream, we catch some tench. There's silverfish in the peg. It's on a natural venue. Fishing. We're going to do two. We've done two things. So we've done 2 sessions. One fishing natural baits, one fishing more commercial style baits. So you can see that the mix of the two. It is fantastic. It's really, honestly, the footage is so clear, and it'll open your eyes of anything that all those things that you were thinking about. It'll put a few things into context for you, I'm sure. Tim Baker, as it gets cold, what sort of changes will you think about through a rod-only league? So we're talking about feeding. I think we're talking about feeding and scaling your kit down. So scaling your kit down, Tim, making sure you're fishing a little bit lighter. You've got to tread that tightrope a little bit because if carp do count, we're at Hallcroft, carp count as a pound. I want to get my carp out. So do I want to go below 010? I think 010, you've got half a chance of getting a carp out. But if you go below
tricky balance that for you, isn't it, on that league? Because like you say, if you've got carp in your peg, you may as well hook them and get them out. But then still, those skimmers, if your skimmers are a pound, 12 ounce to a pound and a half, like you probably will get more bites by scaling down. But you've got that balance.
Here's something for you. 08, which I'm guessing, what line are you fishing at Moorlands for your silvers? 08, 010?
AccuPower, yeah, anything between 08. So on me, like light faffy caster rigs, I'll 08, 09, 010. No more
on a pole, you're getting your carp out on 08, aren't you? On a pole.
Easily, yeah, with like because it's so hard to break it against the cushion of like a number 6 slip, for example. Whereas on a rod, if you've like any sort of, if your clutch isn't set quite right, you can get done on the take. You can they can nod and you've just not reacted or not had your back wind or clutch set right, and they'll do you straight away, won't they? Whereas, yeah, with elastic, it's so hard to get done by them. Yeah,
I think. Yeah, you've got to scale down, but to what extent is the balancing act, isn't it? Which it always is, isn't it? In all fishing, smaller hooks, lighter line, and then it's obviously smaller feeders, and then it's bait choices. And I don't know about you, but I don't know whether a crushed pellet style mix is better than a fish meal style mix throughout the winter. I still don't know. I think, like, you get a beautiful crushed pellet mix, like a crushed expander or just a crushed pellet style mix. I'm guessing your F1 Dark, Sonu's F1 Dark's prime example, or a Swim Stim, prime example of a crushed pellet mix.
Yeah.
But then you can get a fish meal based mix, which there's some fish meal based mixes. Dynamite do one with that's a commercial actual mixed silverfish mix with fish meal in it, and I'm pretty sure your Thatcher's has got fish meal in it, hasn't it?
Yeah, a lot.
So I'm still on an iron whether a fish meal mix is better than a crushed pellet mix for commercial silvers. And I'm hoping you can help me out.
The Thatcher's is an anomaly of a mix whenever anyone asks me about Thatcher's, because Thatcher's technically has the most fish meal in it, but it also has that element of non-fish meal ingredients. So it's a bit of a balance with that one. Like Thatchers, you can catch roach over Thatchers. And I think it is the fact that it's got that element of non-fish meal ingredients in there. It's got some cereals in there. If you were to ask someone like Jamie Hughes, just a crushed pellet is the way to go pretty much every time for skimmers, basically. Fish meal, like an out fish meal, I think it gets to a point, and I think you've got to just go on the safe side and go for like your crushed pellet type mix, your F1s, your swim stim type mixes, which are crushed pellets rather than fish meal, crushed expander. I think that it gets to a point where you were saying before about like balancing, even with like scaled down, you've got to just work out what's best. Do you risk going full on fish meal and therefore risk putting, I think it gets to a point where the fish can be sort of overfaced by fish meal, whereas a crushed pellet's pretty safe. It's not offensive. They love eating it because they eat it all year. And like a crushed expander, an F1 dark, that sort of thing, I think is a safe bet. Thatchers is different. I think that because of that element of cereal, you're almost like getting the best of both. You've got very strong fish meals in there, but then you're also got the other element where you're going on it's almost as if you've got a non-fish meal ground bait, like a lake or so natural mix of some sort, and you're adding it to a crushed pellet. Like, it's getting that balance. But I think, to be honest, the main thing is just using a mix that you're confident in. If you'll be the same.
Confidence is massive. Do you know when you get a crushed pellet mix and you squeeze it together and you can almost feel it in your hand. It's quite coarse. It's almost like sand in your hand because it's coarse. You can feel the individual particles. And then you get a cereal-based mix and it's sort of tacky and claggy in your fingers and it's a bit finer. And when you squeeze it into a ball, it sort of, I don't know, it just sort of like goes into a ball of dough a little bit, but it doughs up a bit more. Do you think that consistency is important with your ground baits? Or do you think it doesn't matter? It's the ingredients in it.
I think it all depends what you're trying to achieve. So I think, like, if purely attraction is what you want, I think a pellet-based mix is better because you almost like just creating attraction through your peg. A pellet-based mix always breaks down. So you know how much you can add so much water to a crushed pellet mix and it'll just absorb it all. It gets to the bottom and it just puffs back out. And it's like you catch a fish and then you're almost back on a clean slate again, especially with just a pure crushed expander, for example. A fish disturbs it and it's just like, I imagine in the peg, there's next to nothing there. I think those more oily fish meal mixes, like you say, you mix them and they go a bit more doughy. I think you've got to be careful because of what it leaves in your peg. I don't think it breaks down and disperses the same. I think that it's in your peg, it breaks down a bit, but a fish comes in and pecks it and there's still bits in your peg.
Because it's clagging in little tiny balls.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's a way of fishing. I know a lot of people, Joe, who obviously is a brilliant angler, Adam Richards, again, do a lot of sort of feeding tiny little thumbnails of ground bait with a dead maggot, a couple of pinkies in there. And I think in that element, it's good because you just you feed one of them, it's next to nothing, and you almost count your fish off what you can catch off one tiny little thumbnail of ground bait. But that's controlling what's in your peg. If you're the sort of angler that's just going to put a big ball in, well, you can never judge what's left in your peg. So then you've got to be really careful what you're doing. Whereas if you're the sort of angler that can basically go, right, I'm going to put that in a cad pot and I'm going to catch 2 or 3 skimmers this big and then work out what's happening. Right, they've gone, so I can get away with feeding another. And you're sort of keeping control of your peg. Whereas I think if you're the sort of angler that wants to be feeding every single chuck, that's where you can get away with a pellet mix and you can feed it because almost when a fish comes in and eats it, it disperses in your peg and you're on a clean slate again. I think with those sort of stronger, more oily mixes, I don't think you can get away with that the same. I think that you end up with too much in your peg and end up in a bit of a mess, or too much bait, which ultimately in the winter puts them off.
Yeah, nice. Right, so Tim Baker's elaborated on that. You're like this. Would you consider Sonu Super Sweet as a winter mix?
Yeah. So super sweet is essentially the F1 Dark, as popular as it had always been. Super sweet. If you look at the 1 kilo pro ground baits from Sonu, they are essentially us saying these are our most sort of basically the best mixes in terms of every ingredient in there is the highest quality possible. Super sweet is basically F1 Dark, but with double the flavor in there, and it's got a bit of a binder in there as well, so it binds a little bit better. But it's, in terms of the mix itself, it's very, very similar to F1 Dark because that is what it was based around. It's just got double the flavor, and it's got a little bit of binder. So it's actually got of 100% 1 kilo bag of ground bait, it's got 10%, which is like a binder. So it basically, you can nip it into little balls a little bit better than you can F1 Dark. But super sweet's a brilliant winter mix, and I know a lot of people that use it.
Do you think the colour makes a difference, Jay? Because obviously we all talk about dark ground baits in the winter. Do you think it actually makes a difference?
I always have done, but I've gone off that theory recently. I see too many people using just standard crushed expander, as brown sandy coloured as you want, and they're catching as much, if not more, than everyone else. I don't necessarily think that the colour. I think it depends on the sort of venue a little bit. So I've sort of gone to the theory that if you're fishing a deep venue, a lighter mix is good because it'll actually. I never think fish live on the bottom, so I think a lighter mix is good at drawing fish down to where you actually want to catch them, basically. Whereas I think if you're fishing a very, very, there's a lot of fors and against, because you go on a natural venue and we all use black, dark ground baits, don't we?
There's anything I'd say about these black ground baits. Quite often we mix it up and it looks jet black, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then you chuck it in the water in the margins and it's sort of like grey colour, or just doesn't hold its darkness, does it? The same.
Yeah, and I don't think that's because the ground bait's leaking the colour. Because I remember once somebody sent a message to the Sonu page, and it was when I first started. And obviously, you start at a company like Sonu or wherever, and you're very defensive. You're very much they're saying my stuff, like this stuff's not what I know it is, sort of thing. Yeah. So you get defensive. And somebody had said, "Oh, I'm putting ground bait in water and it's turning grey, it's leaking the colour." So I was like, well, I'm going to put a ball in my pond and see if it does leak the colour. And you put it in there, and like you say, you look in and it doesn't look black or dark. It looks a grey colour or a dark brown or whatever you want to call it. And you scoop it back out and it's the same colour it went in.
Is it the spectrum then losing its colour in the water? Is it what you?
I think it's light. Yeah, the refraction, is it? Is that is that the word for it? The light, or how your eye works, where you look through, it looks one color, and it comes back and it's a dip. Yeah, I don't think it loses color. I think it's just how it through water. That's what it looks like.
Because obviously, I'm not so sure with using this dark ground bait. I'm not so sure whether we have been a little bit. We've all followed the same path, haven't we? Like sheep. If you turned up with your, like you say, your normal mixes, your brown mixes, is that going to be just as good?
I think on a commercial venue where there isn't that element of, because it all comes down to this theory of predation, doesn't it? Where a roach sits over a dark mix more comfortably because they're less fearful that their silhouette will be seen by a pike or whatever, a big perch. I think on commercial venues, well, no fish has ever had to worry about that, have they? The only thing they're worrying about is us catching them, really.
I think there's been one person who's probably said this in the 90s, and for 20 or 30 years we've followed along the same track, and it's just become this sort of like thing that it keeps snowballing, and we keep believing it, and we keep adding to the story, and now we're all using black or dark green or whatever ground bait mixes it is.
Yeah, and I do think that they work for different reasons. I think there's some excellent dark mixes out there, and people catch over them because they're so good. It's one of those things, isn't it, in fishing? It's impossible to know, but I think a lot of people have got that much confidence in dark mixes and green mixes or natural mixes, and that's more important than the color in theory. I think it is down to that confidence thing, and dark mixes give people a lot of confidence, but the mix itself is brilliant, and that's why you catch over it maybe. But yeah, and also a lot of people have come from that natural venue background as well, where I think it is a lot more important on natural venues. I think there's that element of predation that does come into play, and therefore that's why then when you fish a commercial and you do the same thing, the same theories sort of come into play.
All right, superb. Right, I'm going to put this little banner on the bottom, Jake, because I love this little banner.
I think it's good how you
I know, but look at this one now. Look. So now, because obviously we want people to join the YouTube channel, the Edge YouTube membership, because obviously we've got all the videos on there. The underwater that Travel and Living Tips are talking about. Got all the underwaters on there. You can watch them all, and we'd love people to obviously become members. It helps us out hugely if they join up, and obviously it helps their fishing massively as well. So put the little banner up along the bottom. All you've got to do is hit the join button. Now there'll be a join button either below this video, but on some devices it won't be there for whatever reason, political reasons. But it will be on our actual page, YouTube page. So if you go to the Edge home page, there'll be a join button there. You can join it, watch all our content, and there's hundreds and hundreds of hours now. Any venue, any method. Like I say, got all the underwater stuff on there as well, and big plans coming up in the next few weeks. So yeah, little banner on the bottom. And I'm professional now, Jake. It looks amazing, don't it?
Impressing me, that is. When's this underwater one coming up that you talked about?
We've got an underwater one. We like to do at least we're doing at least one underwater one a year. Early on in the year we did one. We did a shallow. You'd like that. Shallow silverfish one. So
was that the one at Docklow?
That's the one at Docklow. We're throwing maggots, and obviously watching the maggots fall. We had a great field of vision of probably, we could see all around where our bait was falling, and then we presented our rig literally in front of the camera, and it was so good to watch, like these eyed and these skimmers and roach and F1s. They'd zoom up to your maggot, and then last minute they'd die off the side, then another one zoom up and got off the side, and how each individual species fed showed you so much about your bites, because when you get an F1 shallow, basically you pole tip, if you've got everything right, your pole tip just disappears down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where it's hooked itself and go down. And every F1 in this underwater video that was shot, he went like this. Literally up and down. Yeah. Whereas all the eyed and the skimmers were at the same depth, swimming around at the same depth, which is probably why you get little tiny bites from those eyed and skimmers, and you have to be on your game and like lifting up, and they don't hook themselves, do they?
That'd explain why the jigger works and you don't. Because with the jigger, you always think, why don't I just foul hook everything? I'm like jigging my hook. If they're always below and your hook bait's here, and a fish is here, and you're sort of jigging it, well, they're just going to go for it, aren't they? And then you pick up and they hook themselves against that. So
yeah, and that's why I think as well. When you're jigger fishing, it's not necessarily the best method for silverfish, is it? You get a peg full of silvers and you think, oh, if I put the jigger on, I'll catch these. They just don't hook themselves. I think because they're moving, in that same level, they're not hooking themselves. Whereas the F1s come up with that. It was honestly, really good video for shallow fishing. It was fantastic.
And I love that lake. Mickey Mouse Lake, was it?
That's it, yeah. That's it. And Mickey Mouse Lake. It's called Mickey Mouse Lake, isn't it? There's a Moby Dick and a Mickey Mouse, isn't there?
Yeah, Moby's like the big carp one. Lily Pads is Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse, yeah. It's a beautiful lake. Absolutely stunning lake. We're going to talk about, Jake, because I know, Jake, we met when you were working for DHP. You were on Pole Fishing magazine, weren't you? And we'd go out once a month, do our pole fishing feature. You brought your little dog along, Minnie. Your little dog bark, 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 run off around the fishery, jump over someone's pole, eat the bait. Minnie was an absolute nightmare. And we had a great time. Obviously, you moved to Sonu, and we don't go out as often now, which is a shame. But I want to talk to you because it's along the same theme. You're going out with loads of different anglers, obviously shooting magazine features. shooting videos for Facebook, for YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There'll be quite a few people who, and there's loads of them out there. There's some fantastic anglers, and I think that's first and foremost, that's what you've got to be. But what do you look for in a sponsored angler? Because obviously I'm guessing that for Sony, you're sort of the guy looking out and thinking, oh, that'd be a good lad to, or girl to, you know, look at sponsoring or helping out in some way. What is it, the first thing that jumps out at you? How is it you pick someone?
There's probably a few different things. So first and foremost, can they fish? One of the main things, are they good at fishing and have influence on whether that's the people around them or overall in the whole country? And that in the whole country is very hard. There's only probably, I don't know, 10 anglers, maybe 20 that are a brilliant angler that have influence across the country. A lot of anglers are very influential in their local area. Obviously win lots of matches in their local area, that sort of thing. So are they a good angler is number one, is the main thing. There's obviously different sides of things. So social media is massive these days. But that is more to do with the influence that they have. Are they influential on social media, where they're going fishing themselves, that sort of thing is obviously massive these days, which if you look back, 10 years ago was
10 years ago, it was all magazines.
It was completely different, wasn't it?
Here's something for you, Jake. I think I wrote every one of ours poll one, didn't we?
I would have thought so, yeah.
I think I used to. So I'd be writing quite a lot of articles over the course of a year. How long have you been at Sony for?
5 years, I think.
I reckon in the last 5 years, I've wrote 2 articles for a magazine. It's either ghostwritten for you. My thing was to get to obviously help the magazines. My thing was I'll write all the features for you. I'll write it all for you. So I'd end up writing for Match Fishing, Pole Fishing, Angling Times, Angler's Mail, all of those magazines I'd be writing for. And that's just gone. It's just totally gone. It's either ghostwritten for you or the text is a little bit a means to an end sort of text. It's the text is there for. It's not. I don't know. I just don't know if it's the same level of.
I think it's DHP was a little bit different in a way that when I joined DHP, it was always an angler that can write. So I never went in there. Don't forget, I'll come back to what we look for in an angler, because there are a couple of other elements, not just if you're good on Facebook. But when I joined DHP, it was always, are you an angler that can write, not a writer that can fish, if you get what I mean? It's not that I was always an angler, but I definitely wasn't a writer, and I 100% am not a journalist. A few of the guys, like, for example, I think at Angling Times, for example, they do go more down the journalistic route. DHP maybe weren't the same, pole fishing, match fishing. And it was always that angler. So when I was the editor, and that's when like we were going out a lot, there were certain people that I wrote the articles for. And then there were certain ones which I didn't want to take away from your information. So as much as you could have told me everything on the bank, and then I sort of write that down, take notes, and then write it, I still always felt as an editor that I would still try and write it in my way, or how I interpreted what you were telling me. So I always let certain anglers, yourself, Andy May, I don't think I could have written for, because if I'd have tried to write how Andy May,
when you read an Andy May article, I mean, there's a million words to start with, isn't there?
Yeah,
it's a lot of Andy Mayisms in there, isn't there?
It sounds how he talks. He must just in his head be thinking, how would I say this out loud? I'll just write that down on paper. And I never used to want to take away from that. So I didn't go, oh, I'll write this one, Andy or Rob. One, at the time I was going out 3-4 4 times a week.
Yeah,
and
you haven't got the time.
I had 3 weeks to get 20 articles or whatever, and then a week of trying to get the magazine off to print, that sort of thing. So time was an issue, but it was always that thing I didn't want to take away from. You know exactly what you want to say. If I rewrite it and put it down in a way that isn't quite what it's not your article, is it, essentially? So that was always my thinking of it. I do think that there are other people that are more of a journalistic background that can write it and create a different way of writing and a different story from features. I just wasn't that way, because I was never a writer or a journalist. I was never a writer. That wasn't
You
my
were an
background.
angler first and foremost, and
Yeah,
you had a passion.
I could write.
You could do it. You could write, and you could take the pictures, and you could do it all.
And that's coming back to this. When I got into that role, so my route into sort of the fishing trade, I sort of forged my route myself, because I sort of obviously fished before I went off to uni, did criminology and criminal justice, nothing to do with fishing. Came out of uni and got a job as I was a team leader of a payroll and accounting company. And I was like, I don't want to be in an office. That's not what I want to do. What do I like? And it was football or fishing. And as you know, I was far too injury prone to ever become a footballer. So fishing was the route I needed to go down, because they were my 2 hobbies. So I started just writing, and it was different back then, because it wasn't that nobody was doing like your full write-up when you'd fished a match. It wasn't like anybody was doing a blog on Facebook. And there was a couple of lads. There was a lad called Gary Matthews who used to do like a website where he'd write about his own fishing. I thought, I'll give that a go. I'll start writing about my own fishing when I go. And it wasn't long, and Match Fishing were getting in touch saying, can you send them to us? We'll stick them on the website. And that was my route into the sort of trade. I started doing that. And then I got offered a job. Tom called me one day. Do you want a job as an assistant editor? Brilliant. Yeah. And that I sort of went that way. Sort of decided magazines, the writing side, it would go towards video and filming, and sort of learned how to do that, and then got the job with Preston and Sony. So that was like my sort of route through. And I think now, if you were to, the writing side isn't where you would start now. If I was an angler sort of trying to work a route into it, the filming side, I'd just jump straight into, can I learn how to do basically film a video, use cameras, and that's where I'd jump in. Whereas when I started, it was the writing and the sort of kind of get into magazines was where, and even I was a bit late on that. If it was another year or two, I'd have never got my opportunity in the trade unless I went in as like, can I get very good at filming and editing? Because that's where it all moved to. And I think like in the coming years, we'll see it'll move on to something else. And the people that want to get into the trade or want to start getting sponsorships and different things like that will have to work out where that line is of the route into the trade, whether that's as a sponsored angler, if you're wanting a job within a fishing tackle company, you have to work out where that is and push forward with that. That's what I did back then. And I think, yeah, even now as a sponsored angler, if somebody's out there doing that, they're fishing for themselves, they're doing well with fishing, but then they're also doing a video at the side, they're showing potential with the fishing, but then they're also showing potential with what they can output in terms of their own content on Instagram. Like someone who's a really, really good example of this is Brandon George from Guru. So his Instagram's massive, and he got on board with like the reels and different things like that. And he's now working for them full time, from what I can gather. And he just got onto that. He knew where the social media side of things was taking him, and reels and stories and things like that. And he's great at that sort of thing. I think that's, yeah, in terms of
understanding the different social medias platforms as well, because I do quite a lot on YouTube, and you have to almost move with it, and you have to understand what YouTube wants to see from you, because you can't just put any old rubbish on there, because okay, well, I say that some content, just get it out there. Just any content's better than no content, but the different platforms want to see different styles of media, don't they? They want to see different types, different lengths, different pace of the video, different shots, different. You've got to be in tune with each different style of media. So it's not just a case of, like I say, phone video, whack it on, whack something on, because it'll go somewhere. But in that mix of, there's so many people doing it now, it'll just get lost.
Yeah.
What? You're talking about someone like Brandon George or yourself who actually wants to work, or that's their route into being involved in fishing. What about if you're an angler? And I've had quite a few anglers, and they ask me, like, how do I get sponsored? How do I get that? And to start with, I have to sort of like rein them in and almost say, to start with, what do you expect from this sponsorship deal? Because there's very few people that get any sort of money involved. And those people that do get money, it's like not even going to pay for your petrol turn from a match each week. Yeah. So don't start thinking that it's going to pay your mortgage for you, because it's not going to. But what do they have to do to get some sort of deal? Because I don't know how Sonu works, but I'm guessing, is there a couple of levels where you've got one group of guys that you're our leaders, you're our top guys, you can get within reason, you get your bait for free within reason. And then if you've got another level where it's like, you're great at influencing, you're on more local guys, you might have to pay trade less 20% or something like that. Is that how that works for you? Because I know that works. Yeah, that works at other bait places.
Yeah. So basically, there are tiers, but we don't tend to have like the paid tier. Sonu's always been you're sponsored, so therefore we're going to give you what you're sponsored. But there are tiers. Teams, for example, as a team, and there aren't many. There's sort of 3 or 4 in the country, and they get a good deal on bait, but it's teams. But there is an element of trade price on things like that. But as a sponsored angler, there isn't. But we do expect things back in return. So as a sponsored angler, it might be that you're in one of the tiers, and tier A, for example, or we'll start at tier C. We expect you to do, I don't know, it might be a certain amount of social media, show that you obviously talk about the bait. You would do anyway because you're using it. So it's more that you're getting your bait for free, or a certain amount of it, but we do expect some return on that. So therefore, that's what, like, I would be sort of monitoring it. Are people actually, are they worth what we're giving them, because they're basically giving us a return on what we're giving to them? And I think that's just a fair way of doing it. We're not saying to them, you need to pay for it, but then we're also expecting you to do this. The next tier may be that we ask for a couple of filming days throughout the year. So that would be like your next level, the guys that you know that you're going to go out filming with throughout the year. So
they could be they're pretty influential, so it's worth getting a video for and seeing what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that would just be, if anybody was to look at that, is like, well, those people, they're getting their bait for free, a certain amount of bait for free, for example. They all have limits or like budgets, what they're allowed to basically have. So nobody's just going like, oh, I'll have 100 boxes of this, because it's sensible figures, what like at different tiers you should be using, sort of thing. But in return, a couple of days filming. So then those anglers would have to then balance up, well, I think my days are worth this, whereas I'm only getting this amount of bait from them.
Yeah, if he's an angler who can go work in the week and earn £1,000 a day,
yeah, he might go, well, I'm only getting 500
quid worth of bait off you for that day. So
exactly, so it's not even worth. And I think that's where some people don't look at it, maybe like, oh, I'm sponsored. Is that I'm sponsored more important to people than?
I think it is. I think actually being part of something is really important to people.
Yeah.
But it's getting there, isn't it? So I fished a match earlier in the year at local venue to me, and I was next to a chap, and he did well. He did well in the match, and he was like, after the match, how do you reckon I could get sponsored by someone? How would I get sponsored? And I sort of said to him, look, I don't think there's anything wrong with your fishing ability. Obviously, you've got to put yourself out there a little bit more, or get in people's faces. So, is it the sort of thing where I don't think you'd know who that angler was who I'm talking about, because he's not active on social media.
Yeah.
He'll probably have some sort of small social media account, but it'll be a personal one. And I guess that if he has a couple of good days, he might put a post on, but he's not exactly a regular social media guy. But he's a good angler. You know, if that guy, and I don't want to get you bombarded with emails, but you know, if that guy sent you an email and said, "Hi Jake, just to let you know, I'm an amazing angler. I've got Facebook. Don't use it so often, but I've got Facebook. I could increase my social media output. Do you think I could be sponsored?" Obviously, in a bit not as blunt as that. Is it something where you would look at and go, "Yeah, I'll take a punt on this guy," or do you want that social media in place before you start looking at them?
Yeah, you do. You want it in place. Because there's a lot of that message, what you just said, is I probably get to whatever account, my own personal one, the business accounts, the Sonu account sort of thing. We get that all the time.
So just like you know, when you were starting out and you actually created the website yourself and actually put the foundations in.
That was already there, yeah.
Yeah, and it shows that you can actually do that and shows you're willing to do it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you will never. It's a tough one, because it is sometimes the saying, "It's not what you know, it's who you know." I don't think that's strictly true, but without somebody saying, "Hey, Jake, like there's this lad who's fishing the same venue as me all the time. He's doing brilliantly. He keeps winning all the matches. Like, I think we should give him a deal." Like, that's a route in, because you can see that. But if there's no evidence of that, because, for example, the venue that they're going to isn't very well known, or they've not got the strong social media that's pushing them from their side, or their own social media, which, like, how would I ever stumble across that? So people putting themselves out there and just basically being in the public eye is how you do get noticed, essentially. And it's a hard one, isn't it? Because you would like to think the 100 best anglers in the country are the 100 sponsored anglers within the trade across all companies, but that isn't true.
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you?
You would like to think that's exactly how it. But it isn't that, and we know that isn't that. But there's so much more that can benefit. I always look at it like, even though Sony, like, we want to sponsor the best anglers, and that is what every company wants. They want a team of the best anglers. But then there are people that are maybe the tier below the best anglers that are very, very good at being on camera, or being able to put their point across, or showing off, or they're in a really strong area of open matches where they have influence because they're the best angler in their area.
Yeah. Or their style of fishing is fashionable at the minute.
Exactly. So coverage,
those different circumstances.
Yeah. So coverage is massive, because it may be that you've got one or very few very good anglers in a certain area of the country. And yeah, like, personally at Sony, I think you could get our team and put it up against any other team, and I think we've got an absolutely amazing team of anglers. So it's hard, because it isn't. Yeah, there's no right or wrong, but there's definitely that element of, are you good at? You've got to be an influence in your own angling, and sometimes your influence isn't necessarily being the absolute best angler in the country, because not everybody can be that, but people have influence in other ways. They may just have a very, very good understanding of fishing bait, which is massively important to Sony, because that is essentially what we're trying to get out in our media, isn't it? So
yeah, superb. So bottom line is, be good at fishing, but also be good at some sort of social media and be influential.
And another thing is potential. Potential also comes into play, because if somebody could be a young angler that maybe isn't there, they're not the finished article, but you go, well, I know that in 5 years they're going to shape themselves to be very good. Or that's where you're taking a punt. You don't take a punt on an older angler, but you may take a punt on a younger angler that you can see starting to build some influence or a following. And you think, well, we can either shape them, or they're shaping themselves off their own back because they're trying really hard. I think that is potential's another massive one, which it will always get noticed, I think.
Yeah, superb. Right, we've been on for over an hour, Jake. Time has flown. We've got a couple more questions. We'll have to answer them next time. I've got to get on because, believe it or not, I've got to edit a video. I think you've got to edit some videos, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got a few.
Thank you very much, folks, for watching. Thank you very much to Jake for filling in for Lee. Far better looking version of Lee this week, so you're all treated. Until next time, folks. Bye-bye.